The blood from her slashed wedding dress left a crimson trail in the dust as Dahlia Montgomery dragged herself across the barren terrain of the New Mexico Territory. The year was 1878, and what should have been the happiest day of her life had turned into a waking nightmare. The distant silhouette of a covered wagon against the setting sun was her only hope as she clawed her way forward, inch by painful inch, her fingernails breaking against the hard, packed earth. Vincent Holloway saw her from a distance, a white smudge against the ruddy landscape that at first he mistook for a wounded animal. It wasn't until he'd guided his team of horses closer that he realized it was a woman in a tattered wedding gown. He pulled back on the reins, bringing the wagon to a halt beside her crumpled form. "Sweet Lord above," he muttered, jumping down from the wagon seat. He knelt beside her, taking in the sight of her torn dress, the blood matting her dark hair and the bruises forming on her exposed skin. Her eyes fluttered open, deep brown eyes filled with fear and desperation. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle desert wind. Vincent didn't hesitate. He carefully slid his arms beneath her, lifting her from the ground as gently as if she were made of porcelain. Her body trembled against his chest as he cradled her. "You're safe now, madam," he whispered, his voice low and steady despite the rage building inside him at whoever had done this to her. "I promise you're safe." The woman's fingers clutched weakly at his shirt as consciousness slipped away from her again. Vincent carried her to his wagon, laying her on the makeshift bed of blankets in the back. He quickly assessed her injuries, cuts and bruises mostly, nothing that appeared life-threatening, but she'd lost blood and was clearly in shock. He grabbed his canteen and dampened a clean cloth, gently wiping the dirt and blood from her face. In the fading light, he could see she was young, perhaps 20 or so, with features that would be striking once the grime and fear were washed away. "What in heaven's name happened to you?" he murmured, though he knew she couldn't answer in her unconscious state. Vincent glanced around the empty landscape, searching for signs of pursuit. Finding none, he climbed back onto the wagon seat and flicked the reins. The nearest town was Silver Creek, still a good 20 miles ahead. He'd planned to make camp soon, but with an injured woman in his care, he pushed the horses to continue as twilight deepened into night. As the wagon bumped along the rutted trail, Vincent heard soft moans from behind him. He turned to find the woman stirring, her eyes wide with panic as she tried to sit up. "Easy now," he said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "You're hurt." "Where am I? Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, edged with fear. "Name's Vincent Holloway. I found you out on the trail." "You crawled to my wagon half dead." He offered her the canteen. "Can you tell me your name, madam?" She accepted the water with shaking hands. After taking a small sip, she whispered, Dahlia Montgomery." Her eyes darted around, scanning the darkness beyond the wagon. "Are they following us?" "Who's they?" Vincent asked, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. Tears welled in Dahlia's eyes. "The Blackwood brothers. I was to marry Thomas Blackwood today, but Her voice broke. "I couldn't go through with it. When I tried to leave, he and his brothers." She couldn't finish the sentence. Vincent's jaw tightened. The Blackwoods had a reputation throughout the territory, wealthy ranchers with political connections and a mean streak wider than the Rio Grande. "How many brothers?" he asked. "3, Thomas, Samuel, and William." Dahlia's hand went to a cut on her cheek. "They said no one refuses a Blackwood. They were going to force me to say the vows. When I fought back, She shuddered. "I managed to escape during the commotion at the church. I've been running ever since." Vincent nodded grimly. "Well, you're with me now, and I aim to keep you safe." He glanced at the darkening sky. "We should make camp. You need rest, and these horses can't go much further tonight." He guided the wagon off the main trail, finding a small clearing sheltered by a cluster of juniper trees. After unhitching the horses and setting up a small fire, Vincent returned to Dahlia with some dried beef and hardtack from his provisions. "It's not much of a wedding feast," he said with a gentle smile, trying to ease her tension. Dahlia accepted the food gratefully. "I never wanted that wedding anyway," she said quietly. "My father owed the Blackwoods money. I was payment." Vincent's expression darkened. "That's not right." "No, it isn't." Dahlia looked down at her ruined dress. "I thought I was being brave, standing up to them. I didn't think they'd." Her voice trailed off. They'll pay for what they did, Vincent said, his voice hard. But first we need to get you somewhere safe. Where are you headed? She asked. Silver Creek. I've got supplies to deliver to the general store there. Dahlia's face fell. I can't go to Silver Creek. The Blackwoods have friends there. The sheriff is Thomas's cousin. Vincent considered this information. Then we'll bypass Silver Creek. I can send word about the delivery. My next stop after that was meant to be Santa Fe. It's farther, but you'd be safer there. You do that for me, a stranger. Vincent met her gaze steadily. Madam, where I come from, you don't turn your back on someone in need, especially not a lady. For the first time, Dahlia smiled, just a small quirk of her lips, but it transformed her face. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Vincent, he corrected. If we're traveling together, might as well use my given name. Vincent, she repeated softly. As the night deepened around them, Vincent kept watch while Dahlia slept fitfully in the wagon. Every snap of a twig or call of a night bird had him reaching for his rifle, eyes scanning the darkness. He didn't know much about Dahlia Montgomery, but he knew one thing for certain: the Blackwoods wouldn't let her go easily. The morning dawned clear and cold, the October air crisp with the promise of winter. Vincent had dozed only intermittently, alert to any sounds that might signal danger. He rekindled the fire and was brewing coffee when Dahlia emerged from the wagon, her hair loosely braided and her face cleaned of the previous day's grime. I hope you don't mind, she said, gesturing to a blue shirt and brown trousers she now wore in place of the wedding dress. I found these in your trunk, Vincent smiled. They belonged to my sister. She was about your size. They suit you better than that dress did, if you don't mind me saying. Dahlia touched the rough fabric of the shirt. I've never worn men's clothing before. They're just clothes, Vincent said with a shrug, and they'll draw less attention than a wedding gown. He poured her a cup of coffee and watched as she sipped it cautiously. In the clear morning light, he could better see her features: high cheekbones, a small straight nose, and those expressive brown eyes. Despite the bruises and cuts, she was beautiful. How are you feeling today? He asked. Sore, she admitted. But better, thank you for stopping yesterday. Not everyone would have. Vincent handed her a plate with the last of his bacon. I'm glad I was there. As they ate, Vincent explained his plan. They would travel east for a few miles, then cut north to avoid Silver Creek entirely, taking a less traveled route towards Santa Fe. It would add days to their journey, but it was safer than risking an encounter with the Blackwoods or their allies. It'll be rough going, he warned. And supplies are limited. Dahlia set her jaw determinedly. I've had enough luxury at the cost of my freedom. I can handle rough. They packed up camp efficiently, Dahlia helping despite Vincent's insistence that she rest. As she folded blankets, she asked, What takes you to Santa Fe? I'm a trader, Vincent explained. I bring goods from the east to the frontier towns, then take local crafts and materials back east. Been doing it for 5 years now, all alone. Used to travel with my father. He passed 2 summers ago. Fever took him. My sister married and settled in St. Louis. It's just me now. Dahlia nodded thoughtfully. It sounds lonely. Vincent secured the last crate in the wagon before responding. It can be, but there's freedom in it too. They set off as the sun climbed higher, the wagon creaking beneath them. Vincent kept them off the main trails, navigating through scrubland and dry washes. Dahlia sat beside him on the wagon seat, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Tell me about the Blackwoods, Vincent said after they'd been traveling for several hours. The more I know, the better prepared we'll be. Dahlia's hands twisted in her lap. They own the largest cattle ranch in the territory. Thomas is the eldest. He's 36. I'm 22, she added, answering Vincent's unasked question. Samuel and William are younger, but just as cruel. They have men working for them who are little better than criminals. And your father, where is he in all this? Dead, Dahlia said flatly. He drank himself to death 6 months ago, but not before gambling away our ranch to the Blackwoods. Thomas said he'd forgive the debt if I married him. My mother and younger brothers would be allowed to stay on a small portion of our land. So they're still at your family's ranch. Dahlia nodded, worry creasing her brow. I don't know what will happen to them now. Vincent considered this. The Blackwoods may be cruel, but they're businessmen first. They won't harm your family if there's nothing to gain from it. I hope you're right, Dahlia whispered. As the day wore on, the landscape changed gradually, the flat scrubland giving way to rolling hills dotted with pinyon pines. Vincent kept them moving at a steady pace, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat a simple lunch of jerky and dried fruit. Dahlia proved to be good company, sharing stories of her childhood on the ranch and asking thoughtful questions about Vincent's travels. Despite the circumstances, Vincent found himself enjoying her presence, admiring her resilience in the face of what she'd endured. As the sun began to set, Vincent spotted a small stream cutting through a grove of cottonwoods, an ideal camping spot with water and natural shelter. He guided the wagon toward it, his instincts telling him they'd put enough distance between themselves and any potential pursuit for one day. While Vincent tended to the horses, Dahlia gathered firewood and started a small, well-concealed fire. The easy way she moved about these tasks told him she was no stranger to outdoor work, despite her father's apparent wealth. "You handle yourself well out here," he observed as she expertly arranged the kindling. Dahlia smiled. "I grew up on a ranch. My father may have wanted a son, but he got me instead, so he taught me everything he knew about surviving in this territory." "Sounds like a sensible man, at least in that regard." "He was once," she said softly, before the drink took hold of him. As night fell, they sat by the fire eating a simple meal of beans and cornbread that Vincent had prepared. The firelight cast a warm glow on Dahlia's face, softening the marks of her ordeal. "May I ask you something, Vincent?" she said suddenly. "Of course. Why are you helping me, truly? You could have left me in Silver Creek, found the marshal there. Even if he is friendly with the Blackwoods, he's still the law. Instead, you're risking your livelihood, maybe even your life." Vincent stared into the fire, considering her question. "My mother was forced to marry my father," he said finally. "He wasn't a bad man, not really, but she never had a choice. I watched her live a life she didn't choose, always wondering what might have been." He looked up at Dahlia. "No one should be forced into a life they don't want." Dahlia's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a coyote. Vincent found his gaze drawn to Dahlia repeatedly, noticing the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the thoughtful furrow of her brow as she stared into the flames. "I'll take first watch," he said eventually. "You should get some sleep." Dahlia nodded but made no move to return to the wagon. "I'm afraid to close my eyes," she admitted. "Every time I do, I see them coming for me." Vincent hesitated, then moved to sit beside her. "They won't find us here," he said gently. "And even if they did, I wouldn't let them take you." She looked at him, studying his face as if searching for any sign of deceit. Finding none, she leaned slightly against his shoulder. "I believe you," she said softly. The simple weight of her against him stirred something in Vincent that he hadn't felt in a long time, a protectiveness that went beyond basic decency, a connection that seemed to deepen with each passing hour. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Tomorrow will be another long day." Dahlia retreated to the wagon, and Vincent took up his position watching the darkness beyond their small circle of light. His rifle lay across his knees, loaded and ready, though he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. The night passed uneventfully, and they were on the move again by dawn. Vincent noticed that Dahlia seemed stronger today, the color returning to her cheeks and a quiet determination in her movements. She insisted on taking the reins for a while, showing a skill with horses that impressed him. "My father always said I had a way with animals," she explained as she guided the team expertly along a narrow trail. "Said it was because I was patient. Truth is, I just prefer them to most people." Vincent chuckled. "Can't say I blame you there." As the day progressed, they fell into an easy rhythm, taking turns driving the wagon and sharing stories of their lives. Vincent told her about his travels, the strange and wonderful things he'd seen across the frontier. Dahlia spoke of her dreams of having her own land someday, a place where she could raise horses. "My father taught me about bloodlines and breeding," she explained. "Before he lost everything, we had some of the finest quarter horses in the territory. I always thought someday I'd build that back." "Why can't you still?" Vincent asked, Dahlia gave him a sad smile. Dreams cost money, Vincent. All I have now are the clothes on my back, and those aren't even mine. The clothes are yours now, he said firmly, and dreams don't die just because times are hard. She looked at him with gratitude that made his heart beat faster. There was something about Dahlia Montgomery that drew him in her strength, her vulnerability, the way she faced her uncertain future with courage. By mid-afternoon, they reached a point where the trail forked. The wider, more established path led northeast towards Santa Fe, while a rougher track headed due north into more rugged country. Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop, considering their options. The northeast trail is easier going, but it's also more traveled. The north track is rougher terrain, but less likely to have anyone on it. Dahlia studied both paths. Which way would the Blackwoods expect us to go? They'd expect you to head for civilization, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, somewhere with a marshal who isn't in their pocket. Then we go north, she said decisively. Vincent nodded in agreement, guiding the wagon onto the rougher trail. The terrain became increasingly difficult as they progressed, the wagon jolting over rocks and through shallow gullies. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, promising an incoming storm. We need to find shelter, Vincent said, eyeing the sky with concern. Desert storms can be dangerous, especially in low-lying areas like this. They pushed on, searching for suitable protection from the approaching weather. Just as the first fat raindrops began to fall, Vincent spotted a rocky overhang that would shield them from the worst of the storm. He guided the wagon beneath it just as the sky opened up, rain pouring down in sheets. The space was tight, forcing them to stand close together as they watched the downpour. Thunder cracked overhead and Dahlia jumped, instinctively moving closer to Vincent. He found his arms slipping around her shoulders, offering comfort. I've always loved storms, she said, her voice barely audible above the rainfall. Just not when I'm caught in them. Vincent smiled down at her. They're God's way of washing the world clean, my mother used to say. Dahlia leaned into his warmth. I could use some of that cleaning myself. Washing away the past. You don't need washing, Dahlia, Vincent said softly. None of what happened was your fault. She looked up at him, her face inches from his, vulnerability and strength mingled in her expression. For a moment, Vincent thought she might move closer, that he might bend down to meet her lips with his own. Instead, a particularly loud crack of thunder broke the spell, and they both stepped back slightly. We should check on the horses, Dahlia said, her cheeks flushed. They spent the storm making sure the animals were calm and securing any loose items in the wagon that might be affected by the moisture. By the time the rain stopped, the sun was setting, casting an otherworldly golden light across the wet landscape. It's beautiful, Dahlia murmured, standing at the edge of their shelter and looking out at the transformed desert. Yes, it is, Vincent agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the scenery. They made camp there for the night, the rocky overhang providing protection against the damp ground. As they sat by their small fire, eating a rabbit Vincent had managed to shoot earlier that day, Dahlia suddenly tensed. Did you hear that? She whispered. Vincent listened intently, his hand moving to his revolver. Then he heard it too, the distant sound of horses approaching. Get in the wagon, he said quietly, reaching for his rifle. Stay down and keep quiet. Dahlia nodded, quickly retreating to the wagon while Vincent positioned himself behind a large boulder, rifle ready. The sound grew closer, 3 horses at least, moving at a steady pace along the trail they'd traveled earlier. As the riders came into view in the fading light, Vincent's suspicions were confirmed. 3 men, all heavily armed, their faces set in grim determination. The Blackwood brothers had found their trail. Vincent remained perfectly still as the men dismounted about 50 yards from the overhang, examining the ground. Wagon tracks, the tallest one said, kneeling to look closer. Heading north, has to be them. They can't have gotten far in this storm, another replied, scanning the area. Probably holed up somewhere nearby. The third man, broader than the others with a thick beard, spat on the ground. When I get my hands on that ungrateful little, that's enough, Thomas, the tallest one interrupted. We'll find her, bring her back, and the wedding will proceed as planned. No need to get worked up. Thomas Blackwood, the would-be groom. Vincent's finger tensed on the trigger, but he held his fire. 3 against 1 were poor odds, especially when they were clearly experienced gunmen. "Let's keep moving," the tallest one said. "There's maybe an hour of light left. If we don't find them before dark, we'll make camp and continue at first light." The men remounted and continued northward, passing within 30 yards of the overhang but failing to spot the wagon in the gathering darkness and rocky terrain. Vincent remained motionless until they were well out of sight, then carefully made his way back to the wagon. Dahlia was huddled inside, her face pale with fear. "Was it them?" she whispered. Vincent nodded grimly. "All 3, they're tracking us, heading north. What do we do now?" "We wait until they're well ahead, then double back and take the eastern trail. They think we're continuing north." Dahlia's hands were shaking. "They won't give up, Vincent, not until they find me." "Then we'll make sure they don't," he said firmly. "Get some rest. We'll move out before dawn." They spent an uneasy night, taking turns keeping watch. Vincent noticed that Dahlia kept his revolver close at hand during her watch, her knuckles white around the grip. The determination in her eyes told him she'd use it if necessary. True to his word, Vincent roused them while the stars were still bright in the sky. They moved silently, loading the wagon and harnessing the horses without a word. Only when they were a mile south of their campsite did Vincent allow himself to relax slightly. "We'll circle east, then head towards Santa Fe on the lesser-known trails," he explained. "It'll add days to our journey, but it's safer." Dahlia nodded, her expression resolute. "I don't care how long it takes, I'm never going back to them." As the sun rose, illuminating the vast landscape around them, Vincent felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about helping a woman in distress anymore, it was about ensuring Dahlia had the freedom to choose her own path, to pursue those dreams of hers that had been so cruelly interrupted. And perhaps, a small voice in his mind suggested, their paths might continue together beyond Santa Fe. The next few days fell into a pattern of cautious travel and constant vigilance. They avoided the main trails, sometimes following game paths or dry creek beds to mask their tracks. Vincent taught Dahlia how to spot signs of other travelers, how to listen to the land for warnings of approaching riders. In turn, Dahlia shared her knowledge of the territory, pointing out landmarks and helping navigate the increasingly mountainous terrain. Her spirits seemed to lift the further they got from the Blackwoods' territory, though Vincent often caught her looking over her shoulder, scanning the horizon with worried eyes. They made camp one evening in a small meadow surrounded by ponderosa pines, the air fragrant with their scent. After a dinner of venison stew, the result of a successful hunting expedition that morning, they sat side by side watching the stars appear. "My mother used to tell me that stars are the eyes of those who have gone before us, watching over the living," Dahlia said softly. Vincent smiled. "My father said they were holes in the floor of heaven, letting the light shine through." "I like that," Dahlia replied, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "It's comforting to think there's something better waiting beyond all this." "You don't think there's goodness here?" Vincent asked. Dahlia turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I'm beginning to," she said quietly. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Vincent found himself leaning toward her almost involuntarily, drawn by something he couldn't name. Dahlia's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away when their lips met. It was soft and questioning at first, then deepening as Dahlia's hand came up to rest against his cheek. Vincent pulled her closer, one arm around her waist, feeling the warmth of her against him. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Dahlia looked up at him with wonder and uncertainty mingled in her expression. "I shouldn't have done that," Vincent said, though every part of him disagreed with the words. "You've been through so much, and I don't want to take advantage." Dahlia pressed her fingers gently against his lips, silencing him. "You didn't take anything I wasn't willing to give," she said firmly. "After everything that's happened, don't you think I know my own mind by now?" Vincent caught her hand in his, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Dahlia Montgomery." She smiled, the first truly carefree smile he'd seen from her. "And you, Vincent Holloway, are nothing like the men I've known before." They spent the evening talking long into the night, sharing hopes and fears, pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden. Vincent told her about his dreams of someday settling down, establishing a trading post of his own instead of constantly traveling. Dahlia spoke of her passion for horses, how she'd studied breeding techniques from books when her father's drinking left him unable to teach her more. "We could do it together," Vincent said suddenly, surprising himself with the words. "Your horses, my trading post." Somewhere safe, away from all this. Dahlia looked at him with a mixture of hope and caution. "You hardly know me, Vincent." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're brave and kind and smarter than most men I've met. I know you love the land and have dreams worth fighting for." He took her hand in his. "The rest we can learn together if you want to." She didn't answer immediately, but the way she squeezed his hand gave him hope. "Let's get to Santa Fe first," she said finally. "Make sure we both survive that long, then we can talk about forever." Vincent nodded, understanding her caution. Santa Fe it is. The next morning, they set out with renewed energy. Their relationship shifted into something deeper, more intimate. Vincent found excuses to touch her a hand, helping her into the wagon, shoulders brushing as they walked side by side, fingers intertwined during quiet moments. Dahlia bloomed under his attention, her natural vivacity emerging from beneath the fear that had dominated their early days together. She sang as they traveled, old folk songs and ballads that made the miles pass more quickly. They were less than 2 days from Santa Fe when disaster struck. The wagon's rear axle cracked while crossing a particularly rough stretch of trail, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the quiet afternoon. Vincent jumped down to assess the damage, his expression grim as he examined the broken axle. "This is bad," he admitted. "I can't fix this on the trail. We need a proper wagon ride." Dahlia joined him, surveying the damage. "How far are we from the nearest town?" "Red Rock is about 10 miles east," Vincent said, running calculations in his head. "We can't move the wagon, but we could ride the horses there, get help." "Or just continue to Santa Fe on horseback," Dahlia suggested. "Leave the wagon and goods here, come back for them later." Vincent shook his head. "Those goods represent my entire season's profits. I can't abandon them out here, they'd be stolen within days." He sighed heavily. "I'll ride to Red Rock, see if I can hire a wagon and team to transport everything. You should stay with the wagon, keep an eye on things." Alarm flashed across Dahlia's face. "I don't want to be separated." "It's just for a day, maybe less," Vincent assured her, taking her hands in his. "Red Rock is small, but it's a friendly place. The Blackwoods have no influence there." Dahlia still looked uncertain. "What if they find me while you're gone?" Vincent considered this. "You're right, it's too risky," he thought for a moment. "We'll both go to Red Rock. We can take what valuables we can carry on the horses and hide the rest. I know some traders who pass this way regularly. I can leave a message for them to watch over the wagon until we return." Relief flooded Dahlia's features. "Thank you for understanding." They spent the next hour carefully organizing the wagon's contents, creating a hidden compartment for the most valuable items beneath the wagon bed. Vincent wrote a note for his fellow traders and left it in a predetermined spot they all knew to check. By mid-afternoon, they were mounted on Vincent's 2 horses, heading east toward Red Rock with small packs of essential supplies. The trail to Red Rock took them through increasingly populated farmland, a stark contrast to the isolated paths they'd been following. Dahlia tensed each time they passed another traveler, but Vincent kept them moving at a steady pace, avoiding lengthy interactions. They reached Red Rock just as the sun was setting, the small settlement's buildings glowing golden in the evening light. It was little more than a wide spot in the road, a general store, a smithy, a small church, and a handful of houses clustered around a central well. Vincent led them to a modest building with a sign proclaiming it, Harper's Boarding House. A plump, gray-haired woman answered their knock, her shrewd eyes taking in their travel-worn appearance and the way Vincent protectively kept Dahlia close. "We need a room for the night," Vincent explained, "and some information about hiring a wagon tomorrow. Mrs. Harper, as she introduced herself, showed them to a small but clean room on the second floor. "Dinner's in half an hour," she informed them, "and my husband knows everyone in town. He can help you with finding a wagon in the morning." Over a hearty meal of roast chicken and potatoes, Vincent explained their situation to Mr. Harper, carefully omitting any mention of the Blackwoods or Dahlia's circumstances. The older man nodded thoughtfully. "Ferguson at the livery might have a wagon you could use," he suggested. "He's a fair man, won't charge you more than it's worth." After dinner, Vincent and Dahlia retired to their room, both exhausted from the day's events. The room had only one bed, and Vincent immediately offered to sleep on the floor. Dahlia shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Don't be ridiculous," she said softly. "After everything we've been through, I think we can share a bed without scandal." Vincent felt his heart rate increase as she sat on the edge of the bed, removing her boots. "I don't want to presume," he said carefully. Dahlia looked up at him, her expression serious but tender. "Vincent Holloway, you saved my life. You've protected me, respected me, and shown me more kindness than any man I've ever known." She patted the space beside her. "I trust you completely." Vincent joined her on the bed, and they lay side by side, not touching at first, but gradually moving closer until Dahlia's head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her. "When we reach Santa Fe," she murmured sleepily, "I want to start looking for land. Somewhere we could raise horses like we talked about." Vincent's heart swelled at the "we." "I'd like that," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Very much." The next morning they set out early to find Ferguson at the livery. The man was indeed fair, offering them a sturdy wagon and team for a reasonable price. By mid-morning they were headed back toward their stranded goods, planning to transfer everything and continue to Santa Fe. The day was bright and clear, their spirits high as they traveled the familiar route. Dahlia rode beside the wagon, occasionally racing ahead and circling back, enjoying the freedom of open movement after days of caution. They were less than a mile from their abandoned wagon when Vincent noticed something was wrong. Smoke rose from the direction of their camp, too much smoke for the small fire they'd left carefully extinguished. "Dahlia," he called urgently, "stay back." But she had seen it too, and her face paled. "The wagon," Vincent nodded grimly. "Someone's found it." They approached cautiously, leaving the borrowed wagon hidden behind a rise and continuing on foot. As they crested a small hill, the scene below confirmed Vincent's worst fears. The wagon was ablaze, flames consuming the wooden structure and everything inside. Around it stood 3 mounted men, the Blackwoods. "No," Dahlia whispered, her hand clutching Vincent's arm. "How did they find it?" "Must have been tracking us all along," Vincent muttered, "waiting for us to make a mistake." He pulled Dahlia back below the ridgeline. "We need to get out of here." Now, but as they turned to retreat, they found their path blocked. A 4th rider, one Vincent hadn't noticed, had circled behind them. The man grinned triumphantly. "Well, well," he drawled. "Look what I found." He raised his voice, calling to the others. "Samuel, I got them, up here." Vincent reached for his revolver, but the man was faster, his rifle already aimed at them. "Don't try it, mister. Just nice and easy, both of you come down where the brothers can see you." With no choice, Vincent and Dahlia descended the hill toward the burning wagon, the rider following close behind them with his rifle trained on their backs. The 3 Blackwood brothers turned as they approached, Thomas's face twisting with rage when he saw Dahlia. "You ungrateful little bitch," he snarled, dismounting and striding toward them. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" The humiliation, Vincent stepped protectively in front of Dahlia. "Stay back." Thomas laughed, an ugly sound. "And who's going to stop me? You." "Some drifter who thought he could steal what's mine." "I was never yours," Dahlia said, her voice surprisingly steady as she moved to stand beside Vincent. "I never agreed to marry you. Your father signed the contract," Thomas said dismissively. "That's all the agreement I need." The tallest brother, Samuel, Vincent presumed dismounted as well. "Let's not do this here," he said, his tone more reasonable but no less menacing. "Dahlia, you're coming back with us. The wedding will proceed as planned." "And your friend here," added the 3rd brother, William, "will face charges for kidnapping and theft." Vincent tensed, calculating their odds. 4 armed men against him, they weren't good, but he'd rather die fighting than let them take Dahlia. "I'm not going anywhere with you," Dahlia declared. "And neither is Vincent." Thomas lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Dahlia's arm and yanking her toward him. You don't have a choice, sweetheart. What happened next occurred so quickly that Vincent would later struggle to recall the exact sequence. Dahlia twisted in Thomas's grasp, producing Vincent's small backup revolver from her boot, the one he'd given her for protection days earlier. Before anyone could react, she pressed it against Thomas's chest and fired. The sound echoed across the landscape as Thomas staggered backward, shock registering on his face before he collapsed to the ground. In the moment of stunned silence that followed, Vincent drew his own weapon, aiming at Samuel. "Back away," he ordered. "All of you." William recovered first, reaching for his gun, but Vincent was faster, firing a shot that caught the younger man in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. Samuel raised his hands slowly. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold with fury. "You've killed my brother. There's nowhere in this territory you can hide from us now." "He was going to force me," Dahlia said, the revolver still clutched in her shaking hand. "Just like before, I had no choice." The fourth man, still mounted, looked uncertainly between Samuel and the fallen Thomas. "What do we do, boss?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Take William and ride for the sheriff. I'll stay with Thomas." Vincent shook his head. "No one's staying. You're all leaving now. Take your brothers and go." For a tense moment, it seemed Samuel might defy him, but practicality won out. Thomas was clearly dead, William needed medical attention, and Vincent's gun hadn't wavered. "This isn't the end," Samuel promised as he helped William mount his horse. "The law will hunt you down for this." "It was self-defense," Vincent replied steadily. "And there are 3 witnesses who saw him attack her." 3 Blackwood witnesses," Samuel countered. "Your word against ours won't count for much around here." As the Blackwoods retreated, taking Thomas's body with them, Vincent turned to Dahlia. She stood frozen, the revolver still in her hand, her eyes fixed on the bloodstain on the ground where Thomas had fallen. "Dahlia," Vincent said gently, taking the gun from her unresisting fingers. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his, shock and horror warring in her expression. "I killed him," she whispered. "You protected yourself," Vincent corrected firmly. "He would have hurt you or worse." "They'll come after us," she said, her voice hollow. "They'll never stop now." Vincent nodded grimly. "Which is why we can't stay in this territory. We need to go now." "Further than Santa Fe." "Where?" Dahlia asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. "California," Vincent decided. "It's far enough that even the Blackwoods' influence won't reach. We can start fresh there, the horse ranch, the trading post, all of it." Dahlia's gaze drifted to the burning wagon, their supplies and Vincent's livelihood going up in flames. "I've cost you everything," she said, anguish in her voice. Vincent took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "You haven't cost me anything that can't be replaced," he said firmly. "Goods are just things, Dahlia. You're what matters," her eyes filled with tears. Why do I matter so much to you?" "Because I love you," Vincent said simply, the words emerging naturally, as if he'd been saying them his whole life. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I lifted you into my wagon." A sob escaped Dahlia's throat as she collapsed against his chest. "I love you too," she whispered. "I'm so scared, Vincent." He held her tightly, his mind already planning their escape. "We have the wagon from Ferguson. We'll head west, immediately avoid towns, stick to the lesser trails. We have enough money for supplies to get us to California." Dahlia nodded against his chest, then pulled back, wiping her tears. "Then let's go," she said, new determination replacing the shock in her eyes. "There's nothing left for either of us here." They returned to the borrowed wagon and set off immediately, heading west instead of continuing to Santa Fe. Vincent pushed the horses as hard as he dared, wanting to put as much distance as possible between them and the Blackwoods before news of Thomas's death spread. For 3 days, they traveled relentlessly, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses. They avoided settlements, purchasing supplies from isolated farms when needed. Dahlia remained vigilant, often waking from nightmares of Thomas's death, but her resilience continued to amaze Vincent. On the 4th night, they made camp in a secluded canyon, reasonably confident they'd avoided immediate pursuit. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Dahlia turned to Vincent with serious eyes. "If we're going to California together, there's something we should do first," she said. "What's that?" Vincent asked, Get married, she replied simply. I want to start our new life properly as husband and wife. Vincent's heart swelled with joy and surprise. Are you sure? After everything that's happened, I thought you might want to wait, take time to be certain. Dahlia shook her head. I've never been more certain of anything. Life is too unpredictable, too fragile to waste time when you know what you want. She took his hands in hers. And I want you, Vincent Holloway, for whatever time we have. Vincent pulled her close, kissing her deeply. Then we'll find a preacher in the next town, one who doesn't know about what happened back east. They reached the small town of Horizon, 2 days later a dusty settlement on the Arizona border, far enough from New Mexico that news of Thomas Blackwood's death might not have traveled there yet. They found lodging at the local hotel, presenting themselves as travelers heading west. The town's preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Collins, was happy to perform a simple ceremony the following day. Vincent purchased a plain gold band from the general store, all he could afford, though he promised Dahlia something finer when they were established in California. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright. Dahlia wore a simple blue dress they'd bought at the general store, her hair arranged with wildflowers she'd gathered herself. Vincent waited for her at the small church, his heart racing with anticipation and joy. When Dahlia appeared in the doorway, Vincent felt his breath catch. Despite the simplicity of her attire, she was radiant, her smile brighter than he'd ever seen it as she walked toward him. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, the old reverend beaming as they exchanged vows and the simple ring. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent gathered Dahlia into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise he felt for their future together. Mrs. Holloway, he whispered against her lips. Dahlia smiled up at him, her eyes shining. I like the sound of that. They spent one night in Horizon as husband and wife before continuing their journey westward the next morning. As they traveled, they made plans for their new life, the type of land they would look for, the horses Dahlia wanted to breed, the trading business Vincent would establish. We'll need to be near a growing town, Vincent said as they crossed into California territory weeks later. Somewhere with potential for trade but close enough to good grazing land for the horses. And water, Dahlia added, plenty of water for crops and animals. They found what they were looking for in a verdant valley, north of Los Angeles, 20 acres of rolling pasture bordered by a clear stream, with mountains visible in the distance. The land was affordable, the previous owner eager to sell and move to the goldfields further north. Using the last of their funds, they purchased the property and a small cabin that stood upon it. It wasn't much, 2 rooms with a leaky roof and drafty windows, but to Dahlia and Vincent, it was the beginning of everything they'd dreamed of. It needs work, Vincent acknowledged as they stood on the porch that first evening, watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and purple. Dahlia leaned against him, her arm around his waist. It's perfect, she said softly. It's ours. The first year was difficult. They worked from dawn until dusk, repairing the cabin, fencing pastures, and establishing Vincent's trading business. Dahlia took odd jobs breaking horses for neighboring ranchers, earning enough to purchase their first breeding mare, a beautiful chestnut quarter horse with impeccable bloodlines. Word of Dahlia's skill with horses spread quickly, and soon ranchers were bringing their problem animals to her, willing to pay good money for her gentle but effective training methods. Vincent's trading business grew steadily as well, his fair prices and reliable deliveries earning him a reputation throughout the valley. By their second year in California, they had added a proper barn and 3 more breeding mares to their property. The cabin had been expanded to include a proper kitchen and a second bedroom, which Dahlia had begun to decorate with hopeful eyes toward the future. It was on their second wedding anniversary that Dahlia shared the news Vincent had been longing to hear. As they sat on their porch after dinner, watching the stars emerge, she took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. I have an anniversary gift for you, she said, her eyes sparkling, but you'll have to wait about 7 months to fully receive it. Vincent's eyes widened as he understood her meaning. A baby, he whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Dahlia nodded, happy tears filling her eyes. Our baby. Vincent gathered her into his arms, his heart so full he could barely speak. "I love you," he managed finally. "Both of you." "And we love you," Dahlia replied, nestling against him, "more than you could ever know." As they sat together, planning for this new chapter in their lives, Vincent reflected on the journey that had brought them here from that desperate moment, when a broken bride had crawled to his wagon in the New Mexico desert, to this peaceful evening on their own land in California. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked quietly. "The Blackwoods." Dahlia was silent for a moment before answering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not Thomas, I've made my peace with what happened there, but I wonder about my mother and brothers if they're all right." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "When the baby comes, perhaps we could send word to them, discreetly through intermediaries. Let them know you're safe and happy." "I'd like that," Dahlia said, smiling up at him. "They should know their grandchild and nephews or nieces. And would you want them to come here?" Vincent asked carefully. "To be part of our lives." Dahlia considered this. "Yes," she said finally. "This is far enough from the Blackwoods' reach. They would be safe here too." Vincent kissed her forehead. "Then that's what we'll do." Their daughter, Victoria, was born the following spring, a healthy, strong-lunged baby with her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, James, and 3 years after that by another daughter, Elizabeth. As their family grew, so did their ranch. Holloway Horse Farm became known throughout California for its quality quarter horses and Appaloosas. Vincent's trading post in the nearby town of Riverdale flourished, eventually expanding into a proper general store that he visited 3 days a week, leaving the ranch in Dahlia's capable hands the rest of the time. Dahlia's mother and brothers eventually joined them in California, settling on adjacent land and becoming an integral part of the Holloway family's life. The pain and fear of the past faded with each passing year, replaced by the joy of watching their children grow, and their dreams take root in the fertile California soil. On the 10th anniversary of the day Vincent had found Dahlia crawling toward his wagon, they stood together on the hill, overlooking their property, now a prosperous ranch with a large farmhouse, several barns and pastures dotted with horses of all ages. "Did you ever imagine this?" Dahlia asked, her arm linked through his. "That day when you lifted me into your wagon," Vincent smiled, drawing her closer. "I couldn't have imagined this exact life," he admitted, "but I knew from that moment that you were someone worth protecting, worth fighting for." He kissed her softly. "Worth loving for a lifetime." Dahlia rested her head on his shoulder, watching their 3 children playing with the new foals in the pasture below. "You saved me that day," she said quietly. "Not just my life, but my future. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be." "We saved each other," Vincent corrected gently. "And we built this life together every step of the way." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their land, Dahlia turned in Vincent's arms to face him. Though a decade had passed, he still saw in her eyes the same courage and determination that had drawn him to her from the beginning, now tempered with contentment and the deep peace that comes from being truly loved. "I'm still glad I crawled to your wagon that day," she whispered, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Vincent held her close, grateful beyond words for the broken bride who had become his partner, his love, and the mother of his children. "And I'll never stop being grateful that I found you," he said against her lips, "or that I promised you were safe." "You kept that promise," Dahlia said softly, "every day for 10 years. And I'll keep it for 50 more, Vincent vowed. Hand in hand, they walked down the hill toward their home, toward the future they had built from nothing but love and determination, a future that had begun in the most desperate of circumstances, but had blossomed into something more beautiful than either could have imagined on that fateful day in the New Mexico territory. As the family gathered for dinner that evening, surrounded by the warmth of their home and the love they had cultivated together, Vincent caught Dahlia's eye across the table and smiled. The journey from that dust-covered trail to this abundant life had been long and sometimes treacherous, but he wouldn't change a single step of it, for it had led them here to safety, to home, to each other.